Chapter 30. The Last Fight of the Arabella. "Why do you wait, my friend?" growled Vanderkuylen. "Aye, in God's name," snapped Willoughby. It was the afternoon of that same day, and the two buccaneer ships rocked gently with idly flapping sails under the lee of the long spit of land forming the great natural harbor of Port Royal, and less than a mile from the straits leading into it, which the fort commanded. It was 2 hours and more since they had brought up thereabouts, having crept thither unobserved by the city and by M. de Rivarol's ships, and all the time the air had been aquiver with the roar of guns from sea and land, announcing that battle was joined between the French and the defenders of Port Royal. That long, inactive waiting was straining the nerves of both Lord Willoughby and Vanderkuylen. "You said you would show us Zoom Vindings, vir our deasy Vindings?" Blood faced them, smiling confidently. He was arrayed for battle in back and breast of black steel. "I'll not be trying your patience much longer. Indeed, I notice already a slackening in the fire. But it's this way, now. There's nothing at all to be gained by precipitancy, and a deal to be gained by delaying, as I shall show you, I hope." Lord Willoughby eyed him suspiciously. "Ye think that in the meantime Bishop may come back, or Admiral Vanderkuylen's fleet appear? Sure now, I'm thinking nothing of the kind. What I'm thinking is that in this engagement with the Fort M. de Rivarol, who's a lubberly fellow, as I've reason to know, will be taking some damage that may make the odds a trifle more even. Sure, it'll be time enough to go forward when the fort has shot its bolt." "Aye, aye." The sharp approval came like a cough from the little Governor-General. "I perceive your object, and I believe you're entirely right. Ye have the qualities of a great commander, Captain Blood. I beg your pardon for having misunderstood you. And that's very handsome of your lordship. Ye see, I have some experience of this kind of action, and whilst I'll take any risk that I must, I'll take none that I needn't. But—" He broke off to listen. "Aye, I was right. The fire's slackening. It'll mean the end of Mallard's resistance in the fort. Ho there, Jeremy!" He leaned on the carved rail and issued orders crisply. The boatswain's pipe shrilled out, and in a moment the ship that had seemed to slumber there awoke to life. Came the padding of feet along the decks, the creaking of blocks, and the hoisting of sail. The helm was put over hard, and in a moment they were moving, the Elizabeth following, ever in obedience to the signals from the Arabella, whilst Ogle, the gunner, whom he had summoned, was receiving Blood's final instructions before plunging down to his station on the main deck. Within a quarter of an hour they had rounded the head and stood in to the harbor mouth, within saker shot of Rivarol's 3 ships, to which they now abruptly disclosed themselves. Where the fort had stood they now beheld a smoking rubbish heap, and the victorious Frenchman with the lily standard, trailing from his mastheads, was sweeping forward to snatch the rich prize whose defenses he had shattered. Blood scanned the French ships and chuckled. The Victorieuse and the Medusa appeared to have taken no more than a few scars. But the third ship, the Baleen, listing heavily to larboard so as to keep the great gash in her starboard well above water, was out of account. "You see," he cried to Vanderkuylen, and without waiting for the Dutchman's approving grunt, he shouted an order, "Helm hard a-port." The sight of that great red ship with her gilt beakhead and open ports swinging broadside on must have given check to Rivarol's soaring exultation. Yet before he could move to give an order, before he could well resolve what order to give, a volcano of fire and metal burst upon him from the buccaneers, and his decks were swept by the murderous scythe of the broadside. The Arabella held to her course, giving place to the Elizabeth, which, following closely, executed the same maneuver. And then, while still the Frenchmen were confused, panic-stricken by an attack that took them so utterly by surprise, the Arabella had gone about and was returning in her tracks, presenting now her larboard guns, and loosing her second broadside in the wake of the first. Came yet another broadside from the Elizabeth, and then the Arabella's trumpeter sent a call across the water, which Hagthorpe perfectly understood. "On now, Jeremy," cried Blood, straight into them before they recover their wits. "Stand by, there, prepare to board." "Hayton, the grapnels," and pass the word to the gunner in the prow to fire as fast as he can load. He discarded his feathered hat and covered himself with a steel headpiece which a Negro lad brought him. He meant to lead this boarding party in person. Briskly, he explained himself to his two guests. "Boarding is our only chance here. We are too heavily outgunned." Of this the fullest demonstration followed quickly. The Frenchmen having recovered their wits at last, both ships swung broadside on, and concentrating upon the Arabella as the nearer and heavier and therefore more immediately dangerous of their two opponents, volleyed upon her jointly at almost the same moment. Unlike the buccaneers, who had fired high to cripple their enemies above decks, the French fired low to smash the hull of their assailant. The Arabella rocked and staggered under that terrific hammering, although Pitt kept her headed towards the French so that she should offer the narrowest target. For a moment she seemed to hesitate, then she plunged forward again, her beakhead in splinters, her forecastle smashed, and a gaping hole forward that was only just above the waterline. Indeed, to make her safe from bilging, Blood ordered a prompt jettisoning of the forward guns, anchors, and water casks, and whatever else was movable. Meanwhile, the Frenchmen, going about, gave the like reception to the Elizabeth. The Arabella, indifferently served by the wind, pressed forward to come to grips. But before she could accomplish her object, the Victorieuse had loaded her starboard guns again and pounded her advancing enemy with a second broadside at close quarters. Amid the thunder of cannon, the rending of timbers, and the screams of maimed men, the half-necked Arabella plunged and reeled into the cloud of smoke that concealed her prey, and then from Hayton went up the cry that she was going down by the head. Blood's heart stood still. And then, in that very moment of his despair, the blue and gold flank of the Victorieuse loomed through the smoke. But even as he caught that enheartening glimpse he perceived, too, how sluggish now was their advance, and how with every second it grew more sluggish. They must sink before they reached her. Thus, with an oath, opined the Dutch admiral, and from Lord Willoughby there was a word of blame for Blood's seamanship in having risked all upon this gambler's throw of boarding. "There was no other chance," cried Blood in broken-hearted frenzy. "If ye say it was desperate and foolhardy, why, so it was, but the occasion and the means demanded nothing less. I fail within an ace of victory." But they had not yet completely failed. Hayton himself and a score of sturdy rogues whom his whistle had summoned were crouching for shelter amid the wreckage of the forecastle with grapnels ready. Within 7 or 8 yards of the Victorieuse, when their way seemed spent and their forward deck already awash under the eyes of the jeering, cheering Frenchmen, those men leapt up and forward and hurled their grapnels across the chasm. Of the 4 they flung, 2 reached the Frenchmen's decks and fastened there. Swift as thought itself was then the action of those sturdy, experienced buccaneers. Unhesitatingly, all threw themselves upon the chain of one of those grapnels, neglecting the other, and heaved upon it with all their might to warp the ships together. Blood, watching from his own quarter-deck, sent out his voice in a clarion call. "Musketeers to the prow!" The musketeers, at their station at the waist, obeyed him with the speed of men who know that in obedience is the only hope of life. 50 of them dashed forward instantly, and from the ruins of the forecastle they blazed over the heads of Hayton's men, mowing down the French soldiers who, unable to dislodge the irons, firmly held where they had deeply bitten into the timbers of the Victorieuse, were themselves preparing to fire upon the grapnel crew. Starboard to starboard, the 2 ships swung against each other with a jarring thud. By then, Blood was down in the waist, judging and acting with the hurricane speed the occasion demanded. Sail had been lowered by slashing away the ropes that held the yards. The advance guard of boarders, 100 strong, was ordered to the poop, and his grapnel men were posted and prompt to obey his command at the very moment of impact. As a result, the foundering Arabella was literally kept afloat by the half-dozen grapnels that in an instant moored her firmly to the Victorieuse. Willoughby and van der Kuylen on the poop had watched in breathless amazement the speed and precision with which Blood and his desperate crew had gone to work, and now he came racing up, his bugler sounding the charge, the main host of the buccaneers following him, whilst the vanguard, led by the gunner Ogle, who had been driven from his guns by water in the gun-deck, leapt shouting to the prow of the Victorieuse, to whose level the high poop of the waterlogged Arabella had sunk. Led now by Blood himself, they launched themselves upon the French-like hounds, upon the stag they have brought to bay. After them went others, until all had gone, and none but Willoughby and the Dutchman were left to watch the fight from the quarter-deck of the abandoned Arabella. For fully half an hour that battle raged aboard the Frenchman. Beginning in the prow, it surged through the forecastle to the waist, where it reached a climax of fury. The French resisted stubbornly, and they had the advantage of numbers to encourage them. But for all their stubborn valor, they ended by being pressed back and back across the decks that were dangerously canted to starboard by the pull of the waterlogged Arabella. The buccaneers fought with the desperate fury of men who know that retreat is impossible, for there was no ship to which they could retreat, and here they must prevail and make the Victorieuse their own, or perish. And their own they made her in the end, and at a cost of nearly half their numbers. Driven to the quarter-deck, the surviving defenders, urged on by the infuriated Rivarol, maintained awhile their desperate resistance. But in the end, Rivarol went down with a bullet in his head, and the French remnant, numbering scarcely a score of whole men, called for quarter. Even then, the labors of Blood's men were not at an end. The Elizabeth and the Medusa were tight-locked, and Hagthorpe's followers were being driven back aboard their own ship for the second time. Prompt measures were demanded. Whilst Pitt and his seamen bore their part with the sails, and Ogle went below with a gun crew, Blood ordered the grapnels to be loosed at once. Lord Willoughby and the Admiral were already aboard the Victorieuse. As they swung off to the rescue of Hagthorpe, Blood, from the quarter-deck of the conquered vessel, looked his last upon the ship that had served him so well, the ship that had become to him almost as a part of himself. A moment she rocked after her release, then slowly and gradually settled down, the water gurgling and eddying about her topmasts, all that remained visible to mark the spot where she had met her death. As he stood there, above the ghastly shambles in the waist of the Victorieuse, someone spoke behind him. "I think, Captain Blood, that it is necessary I should beg your pardon for the second time. Never before have I seen the impossible made possible by resource and valor, or victory so gallantly snatched from defeat." He turned and presented to Lord Willoughby a formidable front. His headpiece was gone, his breastplate dinted, his right sleeve a rag hanging from his shoulder about a naked arm. He was splashed from head to foot with blood, and there was blood from a scalp wound that he had taken matting his hair and mixing with the grime of powder on his face to render him unrecognizable. But from that horrible mask, two vivid eyes looked out preternaturally bright, and from those eyes 2 tears had plowed each a furrow through the filth of his cheeks. Chapter 31. His Excellency, the Governor. When the cost of that victory came to be counted, it was found that of 320 buccaneers who had left Cartagena with Captain Blood, a bare 100 remained sound and whole. The Elizabeth had suffered so seriously that it was doubtful if she could ever again be rendered seaworthy, and Hagthorpe, who had so gallantly commanded her in that last action, was dead. Against this, on the other side of the account, stood the facts that, with a far inferior force and by sheer skill and desperate valor, Blood's buccaneers had saved Jamaica from bombardment and pillage, and they had captured the fleet of M. de Rivarol, and seized for the benefit of King William the splendid treasure which she carried. It was not until the evening of the following day that van der Kuylen's truant fleet of 9 ships came to anchor in the harbor of Port Royal, and its officers, Dutch and English, were made acquainted with their admiral's true opinion of their worth. 6 ships of that fleet were instantly refitted for sea. There were other West Indian settlements demanding the visit of inspection of the new Governor-General, and Lord Willoughby was in haste to sail for the Antilles. "And meanwhile," he complained to his admiral, "I am detained here by the absence of this fool of a deputy governor." "So?" said van der Kuylen. "But why should Dad detain you?" "That I may break the dog as he deserves, and appoint his successor in some man gifted with a sense of where his duty lies, and with the ability to perform it." "Aha! But Ide is not necessary you remain for dat, and he will require no instructions, dis one. He will know how to make Port Royal safe better nor you or me." "You mean Blood?" "Of course. Could any man be better? You have seen what he can do." "You think so too, eh? Egad, I had thought of it, and, rip me, why not? He's a better man than Morgan, and Morgan was made governor." Blood was sent for. He came, spruce and debonair once more, having exploited the resources of Port Royal so to render himself. He was a trifle dazzled by the honor proposed to him when Lord Willoughby made it known. It was so far beyond anything that he had dreamed, and he was assailed by doubts of his capacity to undertake so onerous a charge. "Damn," snapped Willoughby, "should I offer it unless I were satisfied of your capacity, if that's your only objection?" "It is not, my lord. I had counted upon going home, so I had. I am hungry for the green lanes of England." He sighed. "There will be apple blossoms in the orchards of Somerset." "Apple blossoms." His lordship's voice shot up like a rocket and cracked on the word. "What the devil? Apple blossoms?" He looked at van der Kuylen. The admiral raised his brows and pursed his heavy lips. His eyes twinkled humorously in his great face. "So," he said, "very poetical." My lord wheeled fiercely upon Captain Blood. "You've a past score to wipe out, my man," he admonished him. "You've done something towards it, I confess, and you've shown your quality in doing it. That's why I offer you the governorship of Jamaica in His Majesty's name, because I account you the fittest man for the office that I have seen." Blood bowed low. "Your lordship is very good, but—" "Cha! There's no but to it. If you want your past forgotten and your future assured, this is your chance, and you are not to treat it lightly on account of apple blossoms or any other damned sentimental nonsense. Your duty lies here, at least for as long as the war lasts. When the war's over, you may get back to Somerset and cider or your native Ireland and its potheen, but until then you'll make the best of Jamaica and rum." Van der Kuylen exploded into laughter, but from Blood the pleasantry elicited no smile. He remained solemn to the point of glumness. His thoughts were on Miss Bishop, who was somewhere here in this very house in which they stood, but whom he had not seen since his arrival. Had she but shown him some compassion? And then the rasping voice of Willoughby cut in again, upbraiding him for his hesitation, pointing out to him his incredible stupidity in trifling with such a golden opportunity as this. He stiffened and bowed. "My lord, you are in the right. I am a fool, but don't be accounting me an ingrate as well. If I have hesitated, it is because there are considerations with which I will not trouble your lordship." "Apple blossoms, I suppose?" sniffed his lordship. This time Blood laughed, but there was still a lingering wistfulness in his eyes. "It shall be as you wish, and very gratefully, let me assure your lordship. I shall know how to earn His Majesty's approbation. You may depend upon my loyal service. If I didn't, I shouldn't offer you this governorship." Thus it was settled. Blood's commission was made out and sealed in the presence of Mallard, the commandant, and the other officers of the garrison, who looked on in round-eyed astonishment, but kept their thoughts to themselves. "Now we can about our business go," said van der Kuylen. "We sail tomorrow morning," his lordship announced. Blood was startled. "And Colonel Bishop?" he asked. He becomes your affair. You are now the governor. You will deal with him as you think proper on his return. Hang him from his own yardarm. He deserves it." "Isn't the task a trifle invidious?" wondered Blood. "Very well, I'll leave a letter for him. I hope he'll like it." Captain Blood took up his duties at once. There was much to be done to place Port Royal in a proper state of defense after what had happened there. He made an inspection of the ruined fort and issued instructions for the work upon it, which was to be started immediately. Next, he ordered the careening of the 3 French vessels that they might be rendered seaworthy once more. Finally, with the sanction of Lord Willoughby, he marshaled his buccaneers and surrendered to them 1/5 of the captured treasure, leaving it to their choice thereafter either to depart or to enroll themselves in the service of King William. A score of them elected to remain, and amongst these were Jeremy Pitt, Ogle, and Dyke, whose outlawry, like Blood's, had come to an end with the downfall of King James. They were saving old Wolverstone, who had been left behind at Cartagena, the only survivors of that band of rebels, convict, who had left Barbados over 3 years ago in the Cinco Llagas. On the following morning, whilst Vanderkuylen's fleet was making finally ready for sea, Blood sat in the spacious, whitewashed room that was the governor's office when Major Mallard brought him word that Bishop's homing squadron was in sight. "That is very well," said Blood. "I am glad he comes before Lord Willoughby's departure. The orders, Major, are that you place him under arrest the moment he steps ashore, then bring him here to me. A moment." He wrote a hurried note. "That to Lord Willoughby aboard Admiral Vanderkuylen's flagship." Major Mallard saluted and departed. Peter Blood sat back in his chair and stared at the ceiling, frowning. Time moved on. Came a tap at the door, and an elderly Negro slave presented himself. Would His Excellency receive Miss Bishop? His Excellency changed color. He sat quite still, staring at the Negro a moment, conscious that his pulses were drumming in a manner wholly unusual to them. Then, quietly, he assented. He rose when she entered, and if he was not as pale as she was, it was because his tan dissembled it. For a moment there was silence between them as they stood looking each at the other. Then she moved forward and began at last to speak, haltingly, in an unsteady voice, amazing in one usually so calm and deliberate. I, Major Mallard has just told me." "Major Mallard exceeded his duty," said Blood, and because of the effort he made to steady his voice, it sounded harsh and unduly loud. He saw her start and stop and instantly made amends. "You alarm yourself without reason, Miss Bishop. Whatever may lie between me and your uncle, you may be sure that I shall not follow the example he has set me. I shall not abuse my position to prosecute a private vengeance. On the contrary, I shall abuse it to protect him. Lord Willoughby's recommendation to me is that I shall treat him without mercy. My own intention is to send him back to his plantation in Barbados." She came slowly forward now. I am glad that you will do that, glad above all for your own sake." She held out her hand to him. He considered it critically, then he bowed over it. "I'll not presume to take it in the hand of a thief and a pirate," said he bitterly. "You are no longer that," she said, and strove to smile. "Yet I owe no thanks to you that I am not," he answered. "I think there's no more to be said, unless it be to add the assurance that Lord Julian Wade has also nothing to apprehend from me. That, no doubt, will be the assurance that your peace of mind requires. For your own sake, yes, but for your own sake only. I would not have you do anything mean or dishonoring. Thief and pirate though I be," she clenched her hand and made a little gesture of despair and impatience. "Will you never forgive me those words? I'm finding it a trifle hard, I confess, but what does it matter when all is said?" Her clear hazel eyes considered him a moment wistfully. Then she put out her hand again. "I am going, Captain Blood. Since you are so generous to my uncle, I shall be returning to Barbados with him. We are not like to meet again, ever. Is it impossible that we should part friends? Once I wronged you, I know, and I have said that I am sorry. Won't you say goodbye? He seemed to rouse himself, to shake off a mantle of deliberate harshness. He took the hand she proffered. Retaining it, he spoke, his eyes somberly, wistfully considering her. "You are returning to Barbados?" he said slowly. "Will Lord Julian be going with you?" "Why do you ask me that?" She confronted him quite fearlessly. "Sure now, didn't he give you my message, or did he bungle it?" "No, he didn't bungle it. He gave it me in your own words. It touched me very deeply. It made me see clearly my error and my injustice. I owe it to you that I should say this by way of amend. I judged too harshly where it was a presumption to judge at all." He was still holding her hand. "And Lord Julian, then?" he asked, his eyes watching her, bright as sapphires in that copper-colored face. "Lord Julian will no doubt be going home to England. There is nothing more for him to do out here." "But didn't he ask you to go with him?" "He did. I forgive you the impertinence." A wild hope leapt to life within him. "And you? Glory be, you'll not be telling me ye refuse to become my lady when?" "Oh, you are insufferable." She tore her hand free and backed away from him. "I should not have come. Goodbye." She was speeding to the door. He sprang after her and caught her. Her face flamed and her eyes stabbed him like daggers. "These are pirates' ways, I think. Release me." "Arabella," he cried on a note of pleading. "Are ye meaning it? Must I release ye? Must I let ye go and never set eyes on ye again, or will ye stay and make this exile endurable until we can go home together?" "Oak, you're crying now." "What have I said to make ye cry, my dear? I thought you'd never say it," she mocked him through her tears. "Well now, ye see there was Lord Julian, a fine figure of a—" "There was never anybody but you, Peter." They had, of course, a deal to say thereafter, so much, indeed, that they sat down to say it whilst time sped on, and Governor Blood forgot the duties of his office. He had reached home at last. His odyssey was ended. And meanwhile Colonel Bishop's fleet had come to anchor, and the colonel had landed on the Mole, a disgruntled man to be disgruntled further yet. He was accompanied ashore by Lord Julian Wade. A corporal's guard was drawn up to receive him, and in advance of this stood Major Mallard and two others who were unknown to the deputy governor, one slight and elegant, the other big and brawny. Major Mallard advanced. "Colonel Bishop, I have orders to arrest you. Your sword, sir." "By order of the governor of Jamaica," said the elegant little man behind Major Mallard. Bishop swung to him. "The governor? You're mad." He looked from one to the other. "I am the governor." "You were," said the little man dryly, "but we've changed that in your absence. You're broke for abandoning your post without due cause, and thereby imperiling the settlement over which you had charge. It's a serious matter, Colonel Bishop, as you may find. Considering that you held your office from the government of King James, it is even possible that a charge of treason might lie against you. It rests with your successor entirely whether you're hanged or not." Bishop rapped out an oath, and then, shaken by a sudden fear, "Who the devil may you be?" he asked. "I am Lord Willoughby, Governor-General of His Majesty's colonies in the West Indies. You were informed, I think, of my coming." The remains of Bishop's anger fell from him like a cloak. He broke into a sweat of fear. Behind him, Lord Julian looked on, his handsome face suddenly white and drawn. "But, my lord," began the colonel. "Sir, I am not concerned to hear your reasons," his lordship interrupted him harshly. "I am on the point of sailing, and I have not the time. The governor will hear you and no doubt deal justly by you." He waved to Major Mallard, and Bishop, a crumpled, broken man, allowed himself to be led away. To Lord Julian, who went with him, since none deterred him, Bishop expressed himself when presently he had sufficiently recovered. "This is one more item to the account of that scoundrel Blood," he said through his teeth. "My God, what a reckoning there will be when we meet." Major Mallard turned away his face that he might conceal his smile, and without further words led him a prisoner to the governor's house, the house that so long had been Colonel Bishop's own residence. He was left to wait under guard in the hall whilst Major Mallard went ahead to announce him. Miss Bishop was still with Peter Blood when Major Mallard entered. His announcement startled them back to realities. "You will be merciful with him. You will spare him all you can for my sake, Peter," she pleaded. "To be sure I will," said Blood, "but I'm afraid the circumstances won't." She effaced herself, escaping into the garden, and Major Mallard fetched the colonel. "His Excellency the Governor will see you now," said he, and threw wide the door. Colonel Bishop staggered in and stood waiting. At the table sat a man of whom nothing was visible but the top of a carefully curled black head. Then this head was raised, and a pair of blue eyes solemnly regarded the prisoner. Colonel Bishop made a noise in his throat and, paralyzed by amazement, stared into the face of His Excellency the Deputy Governor of Jamaica, which was the face of the man he had been hunting in Tortuga to his present undoing. The situation was best expressed to Lord Willoughby by Vander Kylen as the pair stepped aboard the Admiral's flagship. "It is Fairy Bowdiggle," he said, his blue eyes twinkling. "Cabden Blood is fond of poetry. You remember D. Apple Blossoms. So, ha ha.